The evening light spilled through the tall windows of Le Ciel, catching on crystal glasses and silver cutlery. May worked her way between tables, balancing 3 plates along her arm with the skill that came from years of practice. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of people who never worried about money. Men in tailored suits and women draped in jewelry that cost more than May's yearly rent filled the tables, barely glancing up as she placed their meals before them. "Your roasted duck with cherry reduction," she said with a practiced smile to the older gentleman at table 12. He nodded without looking at her. May was used to being invisible. Most nights that was fine with her. The less attention, the fewer complaints, the better her tips. But tonight, as she moved through the dimly lit dining room, her eyes kept drifting to the corner where the piano sat. The restaurant's Steinway grand piano gleamed under its own special lighting, polished to perfection but sitting silent tonight. Usually on Fridays and Saturdays, the restaurant hired a pianist, some guy with slicked back hair who played gentle background music that nobody really listened to. But tonight was Thursday and the piano waited, untouched. "Order up for table 7, called the head chef, his voice cutting through May's thoughts. She hurried back to the kitchen, where the chaos couldn't be more different from the calm dining room. Steam rose from pots, line cooks shouted instructions, and the head chef barked orders as plates of beautiful food emerged from the noise. "You're picking up the pace tonight," said Rosa, the other waitress on shift, as they passed each other at the kitchen door. "Good thing, because Mr. Gallo is here again. And you know how he gets when his food isn't piping hot." May nodded, loading her tray with the next order. Mr. Gallo was a regular, a businessman who owned half the buildings downtown. He tipped well but complained often, especially after his 3rd glass of wine. "By the way," Rosa added, "Huang was looking for you earlier. Something about your schedule next week." May frowned. Huang was their manager, and schedule changes usually meant fewer hours or worse shifts. She couldn't afford either right now. Between rent, utilities, and her grandmother's medications, May was barely making ends meet. And then there were the music school bills that arrived every month, reminding her of a dream half-finished. 10 years ago, May had been a promising piano student at the city's arts academy. Her teachers had used words like gifted and remarkable. But when her parents died unexpectedly, leaving her as her grandmother's sole caretaker, those dreams had to wait. 1 semester's leave turned into 2, then a year, then 5. Now, at 28, she took night classes when she could afford them, slowly working toward a degree most people earned in their early 20s. "Your C bass." "Madam," May said, placing the plate before a woman dripping in diamonds. "And the lamb for you, sir." The man grunted in acknowledgement while scrolling through his phone. The woman adjusted her plate a 1/4 inch without comment. As May turned away, she caught sight of the piano again. Her fingers tingled slightly, as they often did when she went too long without playing. At home, she had a second-hand keyboard with 5 broken keys that she practiced on when her grandmother was asleep. It was nothing like a real piano, certainly nothing like the Steinway that cost more than she would make in 5 years at Le Ciel. "May, table 14 needs more wine," Huang called from across the room, gesturing impatiently. The night continued this way, a blur of plates and requests, forced smiles and aching feet. By 9 o'clock, the dining room was full, and a soft buzz of conversation mixed with the clink of silverware against fine china. May moved efficiently between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing plates, her mind half elsewhere. During a rare quiet moment, she leaned against the wall near the kitchen, massaging her lower back. From here, she had a clear view of the piano. Without thinking, her fingers moved against her thigh, playing an invisible melody, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece she'd been practicing when life interrupted her plans. "Do you play?" The voice startled her. An older man with kind eyes stood nearby, having approached without her noticing. No. I mean, yes, a little." May stumbled over her words, embarrassed to be caught daydreaming during her shift. "You were playing something with your fingers just now," he said, gesturing to her hand. "It looked like Chopin." Heat rose to her cheeks. "Just an old habit. I studied piano for a while." The man nodded thoughtfully. "I'm Daniel Winters. I coordinate the weekend musicians here." "Oh, nice to meet you." "I'm May." She straightened her posture, suddenly aware of her wrinkled uniform and sensible shoes. "Our pianist for tomorrow night canceled, down with the flu. I'm looking for a last-minute replacement for the charity gala." May's heart skipped a beat. Tomorrow night was the annual fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Le Ciel would be filled with the city's elite, doctors, business leaders, old money families. The tips would be excellent, but the pressure intense. "I hope you find someone good," she said politely, already seeing Huang waving at her from across the room. "Excuse me, I need to get back to work." As she hurried away, she didn't see Daniel watching her with interest, didn't notice him making a note in his phone. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of dessert orders and coffee service. By the time May hung up her apron at 11:30, her feet were throbbing and her lower back ached. But it was Thursday, which meant she could sleep until 9 tomorrow before her afternoon class. The night air felt good on her face as she walked to the bus stop. The restaurant was in the wealthy part of downtown, all clean sidewalks and expensive shops. Her own neighborhood, 20 minutes away by bus, couldn't be more different. The bus was nearly empty this late. May sat near the driver, her bag clutched on her lap, and leaned her head against the window. As the city lights blurred past, she found herself thinking about the piano again. What would it be like to play a real Steinway? To feel those perfectly weighted keys under her fingers instead of her cheap, broken keyboard? When she reached her stop, she walked the 3 blocks to her apartment building quickly, keys held between her fingers as her grandmother had taught her. The building was old but decent, with security doors that actually worked and neighbors who minded their business. May unlocked the door to apartment 3B as quietly as possible. Inside, the small living room was dark except for the glow of a nightlight in the hallway. She slipped off her shoes and padded to her grandmother's bedroom door, pushing it open just enough to check on her. Lin Wang lay sleeping peacefully, her silver hair spread across the pillow. The oxygen machine hummed softly beside the bed, its green lights blinking steadily. May watched the gentle rise and fall of her grandmother's chest for a moment, relieved to find her resting well. In the kitchen, May found a note on the table in her grandmother's shaky handwriting. "Ate dinner. Took medicine. Don't worry." Next to it sat a covered plate of dumplings. Despite being tired and having spent hours around food, May smiled and sat down to eat. Her grandmother's dumplings were still the best food in the world. As she ate, May glanced at the stack of bills on the counter, held down by a magnet shaped like a piano. On top was the latest notice from the music school, tuition for next semester due in 3 weeks. She'd been saving. But between her grandmother's new medication and the unexpected plumbing repairs last month, she was still short. After washing her plate, May crept to her bedroom at the end of the hall. The room was small, with just enough space for a twin bed, a dresser, and her keyboard set up against the wall. She closed the door softly before turning on the small lamp by her bed. May changed into her pajamas and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the keyboard. It was a Yamaha, once good quality but now showing its age. The C above middle C stuck sometimes, and 5 keys on the upper end didn't work at all. Still, it was hers, rescued from a music store's back room where it had been waiting for repairs no one ever made. Despite the late hour and her tiredness, May's fingers itched to play. She reached for her headphones, the kind that covered her ears completely so no sound would escape to wake her grandmother. Once they were securely in place, she turned on the keyboard and adjusted the volume to its lowest setting. Her fingers found the keys in the semi-darkness, muscle memory guiding them to the right places. She began to play softly, the Chopin piece that had been running through her head all evening. Even with the imperfect instrument, even with her years of interrupted training, the music flowed from her hands with a grace that transformed her tired face. In these moments, May wasn't a waitress with aching feet and unpaid bills. She was the girl her teachers had once believed in, the musician she still dreamed of becoming. Her eyes closed as she played, the melody rising and falling beneath her fingers like a living thing. When she finished, May sat in silence for a long moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Tomorrow would bring another long shift at Le Ciel, more wealthy people who looked through her rather than at her, more hours on her feet carrying food she could never afford to eat herself. But for now, with the echo of Chopin still ringing in her ears, May allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she sat before a real piano, where people actually stopped to listen, where her music mattered to someone besides herself. She didn't know then how soon that imagined life would collide with her real one, or how a single moment of courage would change everything. For tonight, she simply played one more piece before carefully removing her headphones and turning off the keyboard. Tomorrow was another day, and May needed her rest. May arrived at Le Ciel earlier than usual the next day, pushing through the staff entrance at 3 o'clock. The restaurant wouldn't open to the public tonight. Instead, the entire space had been reserved for the annual Children's Hospital charity fundraiser. Tickets cost more than May made in a week. "Good, you're here," Huang said, intercepting her before she could reach the break room. His usually neat hair stuck up in the back, and his tie was slightly crooked, sure signs that something had gone wrong. "We need all hands on deck. The setup crew is already behind schedule." "What can I do to help?" May asked, hanging up her jacket. "The flower arrangements haven't arrived yet, and the event planner is about to have a meltdown. Just be ready for anything." He hurried away, already speaking rapidly into his headset. In the main dining room, the usual tables had been rearranged to create a more open space. Workers hung crystal chandeliers that hadn't been there yesterday, and a temporary stage had been set up near the windows. The Steinway piano had been moved to sit prominently at stage right, freshly polished and gleaming. May watched as a woman in a tailored pantsuit directed staff with the precision of a military commander. This must be the event planner Huang had mentioned. She gestured emphatically at two men carrying a large ice sculpture, her voice carrying across the room. "That goes by the champagne fountain, not the dessert table. No, your other left." "Careful." Rosa appeared beside May, already dressed in the special black uniform they used for catered events. "It's a madhouse," she whispered. "Elaine Whitmore is in rare form today." "Elaine Whitmore?" "The Society columnist's wife?" May asked, watching the woman continue to direct traffic. "The very same. She chairs the hospital board and runs this fundraiser every year. Word is they need to raise $500,000 tonight just to break even on the new children's wing." May whistled softly. "No wonder she's stressed." "You don't know the half of it," Rosa said, lowering her voice further. "The pianist they booked, that famous guy who plays at the symphony, called in sick an hour ago. Huang's been making calls nonstop, but everyone's already booked for Friday night." May's eyes drifted to the piano, something twisted in her stomach, a mixture of longing and anxiety. "Better get changed," Rosa said, nudging her. "Guests arrive at 6, and we still have to set all the place settings." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. May helped arrange silverware, fold napkins into perfect fans, and place the handwritten name cards at each setting. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite: doctors, business leaders, politicians, and old money families whose names adorned buildings downtown. By 5:30, the dining room had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Candles flickered on every table, reflecting off the crystal and silver. Flower arrangements had finally arrived, massive creations of white roses and orchids that perfumed the air. The only thing missing was the music. May was arranging the last of the champagne flutes when she overheard Elaine speaking urgently to Huang near the kitchen. "What do you mean, no replacement?" "This is unacceptable. These people paid $1,000 per plate. They expect entertainment." "I've called everyone in the city," Huang replied, his voice strained. "It's Friday night. Every musician is already booked. What about recorded music? Can we just play something through the sound system?" Huang winced. The acoustics would be terrible. And frankly, Mrs. Whitmore, it would look cheap. Elaine's face flushed. "Well, find something. The first guests will arrive in 20 minutes. As they argued, the first staff members from the hospital began to filter in, administrators and doctors coming early to help welcome guests. Among them was an older man May recognized immediately, Dr. Lee, her grandmother's pulmonologist. He had been kind to them, sometimes waiving fees when her grandmother's insurance wouldn't cover certain treatments. May ducked her head, hoping he wouldn't recognize her here. It was one thing to serve wealthy strangers. It was another to wait on someone who had seen her at her most vulnerable, sitting beside her grandmother's hospital bed. At 6 o'clock sharp, the main doors opened, and guests began to arrive. Women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos filed in, handing car keys to valets and greeting each other with air kisses and firm handshakes. May and the other servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, smiling professionally as they wove between groups. "I heard Elaine couldn't get Thomas Chen to play tonight." May overheard one woman whispering to another as she offered them canapes. "Apparently he's ill. More likely he got a better offer." Well, I didn't pay all this money to eat in silence, her companion replied. The music is half the reason I come to these things. May moved on, her cheeks burning slightly. The piano sat untouched on the stage, almost accusing in its emptiness. More guests arrived, filling the room with conversation and laughter, but there was an undercurrent of dissatisfaction. People kept glancing at the piano, then at their watches. An hour into the event, May was serving the first course, a delicate consommé with truffle oil, when disaster struck. A well-dressed man at table 3, already on his third glass of champagne, raised his hand to get her attention as she passed. "Excuse me," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Is there supposed to be music tonight, or did Elaine cut corners again?" "I believe there was a last-minute cancellation, sir," May replied politely. "The pianist is ill," he snorted. "Convenient. Next thing you know, they'll be serving us chicken instead of the Kobe beef they promised. I assure you." "The menu hasn't changed, sir," May said, maintaining her professional smile. "This whole event feels second-rate this year," he continued, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "No music, subpar service?" He gestured at May dismissively. Heat rose to her face, but she said nothing. 10 years of service work had taught her when to stay silent. "Don't be an ass, Victor," said the woman beside him, touching his arm. "It's for charity." Victor waved her off, reaching for his water glass but knocking over his champagne flute instead. The glass toppled, sending liquid cascading across the white tablecloth and onto the lap of another guest. "Oh," the woman jumped up, champagne dripping from her emerald green gown. May rushed forward with napkins, apologizing profusely even though it wasn't her fault. As she tried to help, another server hurrying to assist collided with her from behind. The tray of soup bowls he was carrying tilted, sending 3 bowls crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking china silenced the room. Faces turned toward the commotion, expressions ranging from shock to disdain. Elaine Whitmore appeared instantly, her face a mask of controlled panic. "Everything is fine," she announced, her voice overly bright. "Just a small accident. Please continue enjoying your evening." But the mood had shifted. The woman with the stained dress excused herself to the restroom. Victor, the difficult man, muttered about incompetence as May and 2 other servers cleaned up the mess. And still the piano sat silent, a reminder of everything going wrong. As May carried the broken china to the kitchen, she passed Dr. Lee. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a small, sympathetic smile. Something in that smile, the kindness, the recognition, made May pause. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. The head chef was shouting at line cooks, servers rushed in and out with plates, and Huang stood in the corner, his phone pressed to his ear, looking increasingly desperate. "Still no pianist?" Rosa asked him as she loaded her tray with salad plates. "Nothing," Huang replied, ending his call. "We're going to have to go without." Elaine's furious. The auction is supposed to start in an hour, and she wanted music to set the mood for generosity. He made air quotes with his fingers. May stood by the service station, her hands automatically folding napkins as her mind raced. Outside, she could hear the murmur of conversation, more subdued now. The children's hospital needed this fundraiser to succeed. Her grandmother had benefited from their care. Dr. Lee had been kind to them, and there sat a Steinway grand piano, the kind she'd only dreamed of playing, just waiting for someone to bring it to life. "I need to use the restroom," she said suddenly to Rosa. "Can you cover my tables for 5 minutes?" Rosa looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, but hurry back. Main course is up in 10. May slipped away, but instead of heading to the staff restroom, she found herself walking toward the small room where they stored their personal belongings. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her locker and took out her small makeup bag. She wasn't much for cosmetics, but she always carried the basics, enough to freshen up after a long shift. In the tiny mirror attached to her locker door, May stared at her reflection. The restaurant-issued bun made her look severe. On impulse, she pulled out the pins, letting her dark hair fall past her shoulders. A touch of the lipstick she saved for special occasions. A quick fluff of her hair, and she looked different. Not glamorous, not by the standards of the women in the dining room, but more like herself. As she stepped back into the hallway, she could see Huang in the distance, still on his phone, his back to her. The piano waited just across the dining room. Her heart hammered in her chest. 10 years of setting aside her own dreams. 10 years of putting others first. 10 years of playing on a broken keyboard in the dark. May took a deep breath and walked toward the piano, each step feeling both terrifying and inevitable. May crossed the dining room, her steps measured and deliberate. Every instinct told her to turn back, to return to her position as an invisible server carrying trays and pouring wine. Who was she to think she could do this? These people paid thousands of dollars for professional entertainment, not a waitress with unfinished music school credentials. Yet her feet kept moving forward. A few heads turned as she passed. She caught fragments of conversation, complaints about the lack of music, comments about the champagne quality, discussions about yacht purchases and vacation homes. No one seemed to notice that one of the servers was heading toward the stage instead of the kitchen. The 3 steps up to the small stage felt like climbing a mountain. The Steinway waited, its polished surface reflecting the candlelight from nearby tables. May had never played a piano this expensive, this perfect. What if she embarrassed herself? What if they laughed? She glanced back and saw Rosa staring at her from across the room, mouth open in shock. Huang was still on his phone, his back turned. And there at a table near the center sat Dr. Li, the man who had helped her grandmother breathe easier during long hospital nights. May sat down at the piano bench, adjusting it slightly as her old teacher had taught her. The smooth ivory keys felt cool beneath her fingertips as she placed her hands in position. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. Then, without announcement or introduction, she began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major floated into the air, tentative at first, then gaining confidence with each measure. Her fingers remembered what her mind might have forgotten during those years away from proper training. The piece was melancholy yet hopeful, complex yet accessible, the perfect beginning. She kept her eyes on her hands, too nervous to look up at the crowd. The conversations around her didn't stop immediately. A few people glanced over, mildly interested, then returned to their discussions. After all, they had been expecting music all evening. The fact that it had finally started was merely the correction of an oversight. But as May moved deeper into the piece, her body swaying slightly with the emotion of the music, something began to shift in the room. The melody spoke of longing, of beauty found in unexpected places. It filled the high-ceilinged dining room, wrapping around crystal chandeliers and drifting between tables. First, the tables closest to the piano fell quiet. Then, like a wave, the silence spread. Forks paused midway to mouths. Wine glasses remained suspended in air. Heads turned toward the sound, eyes widening as people realized the pianist was one of the waitstaff they'd barely noticed all evening. May felt the change in the room more than she saw it. The prickling sensation of being watched made her fingers stumble slightly, but she recovered quickly, pushing through her nervousness. This was her moment, perhaps the only time she would ever play a piano like this for an audience like this. She would make it count. As the nocturne approached its conclusion, May finally dared to look up. The entire room had fallen silent. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her, some curious, some surprised, some moved. Elaine Whitmore stood near the kitchen door, her clipboard forgotten in her hands. Huang had turned around, his phone call abandoned, his expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been pride. Without pausing, May transitioned into her second piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The Impressionist masterpiece was a stark contrast to Chopin's Romanticism, yet it flowed naturally from her fingers. This was a piece she knew by heart, one she had played on her broken keyboard in the darkness of her small bedroom countless times. A woman at a nearby table pressed a hand to her chest. An older man removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. Dr. Li smiled gently, nodding in recognition, not of the piece, but of the talent he had never known his patient's granddaughter possessed. As May played, she was transported. The weight of double shifts and unpaid bills lifted. The ache in her feet from hours of standing vanished. The years of putting dreams aside melted away. In this moment, she was exactly who she had always meant to be. The music rose and fell like ocean waves, building to crescendos that made her whole body tense with effort, then subsiding into passages so delicate, they seemed to hang in the air like mist. Her hair fell forward as she leaned into a particularly moving section, creating a curtain between her and the audience. Behind this veil, she smiled, a private expression of pure joy. When the final notes of Clair de Lune faded, the silence that followed was absolute. Not a cough, not a whisper, not the clink of a glass disturbed it. For 3 seconds, she counted them in her head. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then came the applause. It started at Dr. Lee's table and spread quickly, building into a thunderous standing ovation. People who had ignored her all evening were now on their feet, their faces animated with genuine emotion. Elaine Whitmore was clapping so hard her expensive bracelet jingled audibly. Even Victor, the difficult guest who had caused the earlier scene, stood applauding, his earlier rudeness seemingly forgotten. May's cheeks burned. She hadn't planned for this part, the acknowledgement. Waitresses were supposed to be invisible, efficient but unnoticed. Now everyone was looking at her, seeing her, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. Elaine rushed to the stage, an entirely new expression on her face. Gone was the stressed event planner, replaced by someone who looked almost childlike with excitement. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice carrying in the still applauding room. "Absolutely extraordinary. Would you play more for us?" May glanced toward Huang, unsure if she was in trouble for abandoning her duties. Their eyes met across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, he gave a small nod of permission. "I'd be happy to," May said, her voice soft but steady. As she turned back to the piano, she caught sight of Rosa giving her an enthusiastic thumbs up from beside the kitchen door. The head chef had even emerged from his domain, standing with arms crossed but with an unmistakable look of approval. For her third piece, May chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The famous first movement began softly, drawing the audience back into their seats. Waiters resumed their service, moving quietly between tables, but the usual dining room chatter didn't resume. People ate in contemplative silence, the music now the central focus of the evening rather than a background element. May's fingers moved across the keys with increasing confidence. This was the piece she had been working on when her parents died, the one she had never properly finished learning. Yet somehow tonight, the notes came to her as if guided by something beyond her conscious mind. As she played, she noticed a distinguished-looking man at a corner table watching her with particular intensity. He leaned over to speak quietly to his companion, who nodded and made a note on a napkin. May didn't recognize him, but there was something in his gaze, an assessment, an appreciation, that made her sit a little straighter. The Moonlight Sonata gave way to a Schubert impromptu, then a Bach prelude. May lost track of time, lost in the pure pleasure of playing music that deserved to be heard on an instrument worthy of its beauty. She was vaguely aware of the dinner service continuing around her, of the main course being cleared and dessert being served, but these details seemed distant, unimportant. When she finally paused, her fingers hovering above the keys, she was surprised to find that nearly 2 hours had passed. The auction portion of the evening was due to begin, and Elaine was making her way to the small podium set up near the piano. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elaine said into the microphone, "I think you'll agree that we've been treated to something truly special tonight." She turned to May with genuine warmth. "Would you please introduce yourself to our guests?" May stood somewhat awkwardly, smoothing her server's uniform with damp palms. The spotlight that had been directed at the piano now illuminated her fully, and she felt exposed, vulnerable. "My name is May Wang," she said, her voice barely audible until she remembered her grandmother's advice to speak from her diaphragm. "I work here at Le Ciel. Thank you for listening." Simple words, but they were met with another round of enthusiastic applause. May gave a small bow the way she had been taught as a child before recitals, and stepped back from the piano. As the auction began, May slipped off the stage, intending to return to her duties. But before she could reach the kitchen, Dr. Lee intercepted her path. "Your grandmother never told me her granddaughter was a pianist," he said, smiling. "Now I understand why she's been so determined to get better. She wants to hear you play at your graduation recital." May blinked back sudden tears. "That's still a long way off. I can only take one class at a time." "Perhaps not as long as you think," Dr. Lee replied cryptically before being called back to his table by a colleague. As May pushed through the kitchen doors, she was met with something she'd never experienced before at Le Ciel: applause from the kitchen staff. Line cooks, dishwashers, prep chefs, and servers all paused in their work to acknowledge her. The head chef, a man known for his impossible standards and rare praise, gave her a nod that felt more valuable than any standing ovation. "Well," Rosa said, appearing at her side with a tray of chocolate mousse. "I guess you've been keeping secrets." May smiled, still floating on the strange high of performance and recognition. "Not secrets, just dreams I thought would have to wait." She picked up her own tray, ready to return to work. But something had fundamentally changed, and she knew it. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The remainder of the evening passed in a dream-like haze for May. She returned to her duties, carrying dessert trays and pouring coffee, but everything had changed. Guests who had previously looked through her now smiled warmly, some even thanking her by name. A woman at table 7 asked for her autograph on the evening's program. An elderly gentleman stopped her to say that her Debussy had brought tears to his eyes for the first time since his wife passed. "You play with your heart, not just your hands," he told her, patting her arm gently. The auction proceeded with unprecedented enthusiasm. Elaine Whitmore, now beaming with success rather than tense with worry, announced that they had already surpassed their fundraising goal, and bidding for the major items hadn't even started yet. The mood in the room had transformed from polite obligation to genuine generosity, all riding on the wave of emotion May's music had created. As May cleared dessert plates from a table near the window, she noticed the distinguished man who had watched her so intently during her performance, making his way toward her. He moved with purpose, navigating between tables with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. "Excuse me, Ms. Wong?" he said as he approached. Up close, she could see the fine cut of his suit, the understated gold watch at his wrist, markers of wealth worn with the ease of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "Yes?" May balanced her tray of dirty dishes, unsure whether to continue working or stop entirely. "Anton Reeves." He extended his hand, then seemed to realize her hands were full, and smoothly withdrew it. "I'm the director of the City Philharmonic." May nearly dropped her tray. Everyone in the local music community knew Anton Reeves, a former concert pianist turned director, who had transformed the city's orchestra from regional ensemble to nationally recognized institution. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Reeves," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. "The honor is mine. Your performance tonight was remarkable, especially considering the circumstances." He gestured to her uniform, the tray in her hands. "May I ask where you studied?" "Central Music Academy. But I had to leave in my second year." She didn't elaborate on the reasons: death, illness, money. Those were private burdens. "And you've maintained that level of skill while working full-time?" His eyebrows rose, genuinely impressed. "That speaks to both talent and dedication." A busboy passed nearby, and May impulsively handed off her tray to him. He took it with a knowing grin and continued toward the kitchen. "I practice when I can," she said. "My keyboard at home isn't much, but it's something." Anton nodded, his eyes assessing her with professional interest. "Well, Ms. Wong, I'd like to continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Would you be available to visit my office at the concert hall next week? I may have a proposition that would interest you." From his pocket, he produced a business card, crisp and understated, which he placed in her hand. The embossed lettering felt substantial between her fingers. Yes, of course," she stammered. "Excellent. Call my assistant to arrange a time." He smiled again. "And May? What you did tonight wasn't just brave. It was artistry of the highest order. Never forget that." Before she could respond, he was called away by colleagues, leaving May staring at the business card in her hand as if it might disappear at any moment. The remainder of the night blurred together. The auction concluded, raising nearly double the expected amount. Guests began to depart, many stopping by the piano to look at it with newfound appreciation, as if it had been transformed by May's touch. As the last guests filtered out, the staff began the arduous process of breaking down the event. Tables were cleared, linens removed, rented chairs stacked for pickup. Usually this was the most exhausting part of catering, the adrenaline of service gone, leaving only fatigue and aching feet. But tonight, May moved through her tasks with unusual energy. Rosa worked alongside her, peppering her with questions about her music background. "So all this time when you said you were studying, you meant music? Not business or something?" Rosa asked as they folded tablecloths. "Classical piano performance," May confirmed. "I'm still about 2 years away from finishing my degree. Taking night classes when I can afford them." "Well, after tonight, I'm guessing that's going to change," Rosa said, nodding toward Huang, who was approaching with an unusual expression on his face. May braced herself. Despite the audience's approval, she had still abandoned her post during service. Technically a firing offense at Le Ciel, where staff discipline was paramount. Huang said, his tone unreadable. The owner wants to see you. May's stomach dropped. The owner, Mr. Zhao, rarely appeared at the restaurant, managing his small empire of upscale establishments from a distance. When he did show up, it usually meant someone was in trouble. She followed Huang to the small office off the kitchen, straightening her rumpled uniform as best she could. Mr. Zhao sat behind the desk, his expression inscrutable, hands folded in front of him. "Ms. Huang," he said as she entered. "Please sit." May perched on the edge of the chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sir, about tonight," he held up a hand, stopping her. "Mrs. Whitmore called me personally an hour ago." "Do you know what she said?" May shook her head silently. "She said that your performance single-handedly changed the energy of the event, that they raised more money tonight than in the previous 3 years combined." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "She has already booked next year's fundraiser with us, on the condition that you play again." Relief flooded through May, so powerful she felt momentarily lightheaded. "I'm not firing you, Ms. Huang," Mr. Zhao continued, correctly interpreting her expression. "Quite the opposite. I'd like to offer you a new position." "A new position?" "We've been considering adding regular piano performances during our dinner service, Thursday through Saturday evenings. The pay would be considerably better than waitressing and the hours more conducive to continuing your studies." May's mind raced. Better pay, regular hours, doing what she loved. "You'd still help with service during busy periods," he added, "but your primary role would be as our house pianist." Thank you, Mr. Zhao. That's incredibly generous." He shook his head slightly. "It's not generosity. It's good business. What I heard tonight wasn't just pretty music. It was an experience people will pay to have again." He stood, indicating the meeting was over. "Think about it. Let me know your decision by Monday." May floated through the rest of cleanup, barely noticing when they finally finished at 2 a.m. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed face. Rosa gave her a quick hug before heading toward her bus stop, while May waited for the night bus that would take her home. As she rode through the darkened city, May clutched her bag containing Anton Reeves's business card and a folded check, her share of the evening's unusually large tip pool. The bus was nearly empty, just her and a few late-night workers dozing against windows. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the streetlights blur past, trying to process everything that had happened. By the time she reached her stop, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. She walked quickly through her quiet neighborhood, passing closed shops and silent apartments. When she unlocked her door, she expected to find the apartment dark and still, her grandmother long asleep. Instead, a soft light glowed from the kitchen. May set down her bag and followed the light, finding Grandmother Lin at the small table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You're up late," May said softly. "Early, not late," her grandmother corrected with a small smile. "I wanted to hear how it went." May sat down across from her, suddenly overwhelmed. The emotion she had held at bay all night, through the performance, the accolades, the offers, came rushing forward. Her eyes filled with tears. "May." Concern crossed her grandmother's face. "What happened?" "I played, Grandmother," May whispered. "I played the piano at Le Ciel." Lynn's eyes widened. "The fancy restaurant's piano? How, why?" The words tumbled out then. The canceled pianist, the tense atmosphere, her impulsive decision, the silence that fell over the room, the applause that followed. Her grandmother listened without interruption, her eyes growing brighter with each detail. "The director of the Philharmonic wants to meet with me," May finished. "And Mr. Zhao offered me a job as the restaurant's regular pianist." Lynn reached across the table and took her granddaughter's hands. Her grip was stronger than it had been in months. "Your mother would be so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She always said your music would find its way into the world." May squeezed her grandmother's hands gently. "I've been thinking, if I take Mr. Zhao's offer, I could afford to take more classes next semester. Maybe even go full-time by spring." "You'll finish your degree," Lynn nodded firmly, "and I'll be there to see it." You need to rest now, May said, noticing the tired lines around her grandmother's eyes. It's late for you. First, play something for me? Lynn asked. It's been too long since I heard you play for joy, not just practice. May hesitated, thinking of her neighbors, the early hour, her own exhaustion. But looking at her grandmother's expectant face, how could she refuse? They moved to May's small bedroom where the electronic keyboard sat. Despite its missing keys and scratched surface, it had been her lifeline to music for years. She turned the volume low, put on her headphones, and handed the second pair to her grandmother. As the first light of dawn crept through her window blinds, May played a Chinese folk song her mother had taught her as a child. Lynn closed her eyes, swaying gently to the music, a peaceful smile on her face. In that moment, May knew that whatever opportunities tomorrow might bring, this was what mattered most, the music that connected her to her past and would carry her into her future. 6 months passed like a dream. Spring bloomed across the city, bringing cherry blossoms to the park near May's apartment and new beginnings that once seemed impossible. May stood outside the imposing glass doors of the city concert hall, clutching a folder of sheet music. No longer in a waitress uniform, she wore a simple blue dress, affordable but elegant. She checked her watch. 15 minutes early for rehearsal, just as Anton liked. The security guard recognized her immediately. Morning, Ms. Wang. Big day today, huh? Morning, Tom. Yes, first rehearsal with the full orchestra. Her stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nerves. You'll knock 'em dead, he said confidently, holding the door for her. Inside, the concert hall was already alive with activity. Musicians unpacked instruments, the soft cacophony of warm-up scales and tuning filling the space. He made her way to the gleaming grand piano center stage, her fingers itching to touch the keys. 6 months ago, she had been carrying plates and pouring wine. Now she was the featured soloist for the Philharmonic's summer concert series. Her meeting with Anton Reeves had changed everything. After hearing her play again in the privacy of his office, he'd offered her something extraordinary, a special scholarship to complete her degree, combined with an apprenticeship at the Philharmonic. Raw talent like yours comes along maybe once in a decade, he'd told her. But you need proper training to reach your potential. With his recommendation, the university had allowed her to accelerate her studies. What would have taken 2 more years of night classes was now condensed into an intensive program she could complete by fall. Her days were packed with theory classes, practice sessions, and now, rehearsals. May sat at the piano bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, familiarizing herself again with their weight and feel. This wasn't just any piano. It was a concert Steinway worth more than her entire apartment building. There she is, our rising star, Anton said, approaching with his characteristic energy. At 62, he moved with the vigor of someone decades younger, his passion for music fueling every step. Ready for today? As ready as I'll ever be, May replied, managing a smile despite the butterflies in her stomach. You've put in the work, he said simply. Now just play from your heart like you did that night at Le Ciel. Le Ciel. The restaurant had kept its promise, making May their house pianist Thursday through Sunday evenings. The owner had even installed a small brass plaque on the piano, home of May Wang's debut performance. Regular patrons now requested tables near the piano, and the restaurant had added a special pianist's menu, a prix-fixe dinner that concluded just as May began to play. Her tips from those performances, combined with her scholarship and apprenticeship stipend, had allowed her to move her grandmother to a ground-floor apartment in a better building. No more stairs to navigate, no more worrying about the heating breaking down in winter. Dr. Lee had connected them with a respiratory specialist who adjusted her grandmother's treatment, improving her breathing significantly. Places everyone, the conductor, Madame Yoshida, wrapped her baton on the music stand. Let's begin with the Rachmaninoff. May straightened her posture, placing her hands in position. 6 months of intensive training had honed her natural talent, filling in the gaps from her interrupted education. Her technique was sharper now, her understanding of musical theory deeper, but Anton had been careful to preserve what made her playing special. That raw emotional quality that had silenced a room full of wealthy patrons. The orchestra began the opening theme of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. May counted measures, waiting for her entrance. When it came, her fingers flew across the keys with confidence born of hundreds of hours of practice. This piece, brooding, romantic, technically challenging, had once seemed beyond her reach. Now it was becoming a part of her. After rehearsal, May checked her phone to find a text from Rosa. "Don't forget dinner tonight. Everyone's coming to celebrate." She smiled. Despite her changed circumstances, May had kept close with her friends from Le Ciel. Rosa was now head waitress, promoted after May moved to the piano. They still met for coffee before shifts, still complained about difficult customers, still shared dreams of what might come next. Tonight was a celebration dinner at Rosa's apartment, a small gathering to mark May's first orchestral rehearsal and Rosa's promotion. The kitchen staff had promised to bring food, ensuring a feast far beyond what any of them could normally afford. As May gathered her music, Anton approached again. "Before you go," he said, "I wanted to share some news. The board approved our special outreach program." May's eyes widened. "Really? When can we start?" "Next month. We'll begin with 3 schools in the East District." The program had been May's idea, bringing music education to neighborhoods like the one she'd grown up in, identifying talented children who might otherwise never touch a piano or violin. "Kids like me," she'd told Anton, "who have the passion but not the opportunity." "Your story convinced them," Anton said. "Sometimes the board forgets that talent exists everywhere, not just in private music academies." May nodded, thinking of the children in her old neighborhood. How many potential musicians, artists, or writers were waiting there, needing just one person to recognize their gift? That evening, May stopped by Le Ciel before heading to Rosa's dinner. The restaurant was between lunch and dinner service, quiet except for the soft clink of silverware being polished and tables being set. Huang spotted her from across the room and waved her over. "Perfect timing," he said. "There's someone here who wants to meet you." He led her to a table where a middle-aged woman sat with a girl of about 12. The girl's eyes widened when she saw May. "This is Mrs. Chen and her daughter Lily," Huang explained. "They came by hoping to catch you before your performance tonight." The girl stood up, clutching a program from May's recent student recital. "I saw you play last month," she said shyly. "It was amazing." "Thank you," May replied, touched by the girl's enthusiasm. "Lily's been taking piano lessons for 2 years," her mother explained. "But after hearing you play, she's been practicing nonstop. Her teacher says she has real potential. Would you?" Lily hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you sign my program? And maybe tell me how you got so good?" As May sat with the young girl, answering her eager questions about practice techniques and favorite composers, she felt a strange sense of coming full circle. Just 6 months ago, she had been the waitress who dared to sit at the fancy piano. Now she was the pianist inspiring another young girl to pursue her own musical dreams. After meeting with Lily, May played a quick scale on the restaurant's piano, the same one that had changed her life, before heading to Rosa's apartment. The dinner was everything she'd expected: loud, joyful, filled with good food and better company. The restaurant staff treated her with the same friendly teasing as always, refusing to let her newfound status go to her head. "So when you're all famous," the head chef asked over dessert, "will you still come peel potatoes with us on slow nights?" "Only if you still let me take home the leftover tiramisu," May shot back, making everyone laugh. Late that night, May returned to the apartment she shared with her grandmother. She found Lynn sitting by the window watching the city lights. "How was rehearsal?" Lynn asked, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Good. Challenging," May admitted, setting down her bag. "Madame Yoshida thinks I rushed the cadenza in the 3rd movement. And is she right?" May grinned. "Probably." Lynn patted the seat beside her. "I have something for you." From beside her chair, she lifted a small wooden box. Mai recognized it immediately. Her mother's jewelry box, brought from China decades ago. "I've been waiting for the right time," Lynn said, opening the box carefully. From inside, she removed a jade pendant on a simple silver chain. "This belonged to your mother. Before that, to her mother. It was meant to be given when you completed your musical training." "Grandmother, I haven't graduated yet." "You will," Lynn said firmly. "And your mother would want you to have this now for your first concert." The pendant was cool and smooth in May's palm. A simple circle of jade with an etched design, notes of music flowing in a continuous line. She wore it for her first performance at the conservatory in Shanghai. Lin continued. She would be so proud to see you wearing it for yours. May's eyes filled with tears. Will you come to the concert? Dr. Li says you're strong enough now. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Lin replied with a smile. I've already asked Rosa to help me pick out a proper dress. As May fastened the jade pendant around her neck, she caught sight of her reflection in the window glass. The girl looking back at her had changed, not just in circumstances, but in confidence. 6 months ago, she had been afraid to be seen, to be heard. Now she was preparing to play for hundreds of people, to teach children from her old neighborhood, to carry forward not just her own dreams, but her mother's legacy. From the next room came the soft whir of her grandmother's oxygen machine, now used only at night. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. And here, in this small apartment that finally felt like the home it was meant to be, May Wang, waitress turned pianist, felt the full circle of her journey. The piano had always been inside her, waiting to be heard. All it took was one moment of courage to let the music out, and the willingness of others to truly listen. In 2 weeks, she would walk onto the concert hall stage. Her grandmother would be in the front row. Her friends from Le Ciel would be scattered throughout the audience. And as she placed her hands on the keys of the concert grand piano, May would remember that other night, that other piano, and the moment when silence gave way to something beautiful. She would play from her heart. And once again the crowd would listen.